Bruce, what an honor to talk with you, man. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, as you know, I'm a big fan of your podcast. And
I didn't know that, but well, up until a couple of days ago.
Yeah, so I appreciate you spending some time with us.
Yeah, no,
here at the show.
It's nice to be able to be here, to be in this booth. It's funny, 3 or 4 years ago was the first time I came to SHOT Show, and I'd see Leupold and I'd see other organizations, these big organizations that I was excited about that were doing cool things as a casual observer, but now to be like in the mix a little bit feels good.
Yeah, awesome. Well,
how's
welcome.
the show been?
It's been really good. It's I'm always impressed with the support that this industry has for SHOT Show and what it does. A lot of folks don't know, but the SHOT Show's part of the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is essentially the trade organization for the firearms industry.
Yeah.
And so the money that we spend on exhibiting here and talking to customers and doing various media things that we do here, that all goes to really protect our Second Amendment rights.
Yeah.
The National Shooting Sports Foundation is, I'm on the board of directors, and they do a really, really good job of supporting the industry and fighting for our rights to make sure that we can hunt and shoot and do the things that we love to do. So
yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting time. You think about everything that's going on in Virginia, for example, even this week with the protests and everything with the Second Amendment infringement, I would call it. But it's a really interesting time in the firearms industry and community. I don't know if maybe that's the right word. Assault on our rights is it's a dangerous precedent.
Yeah, and I think that is the right word.
Yeah.
And I think it's our job to make sure that, we are really not only fighting to protect that, but really talking about the things that we do as an industry positively.
Mm-hmm.
Project Child Safe, about making sure that you're, handling and taking care of your firearms and locking them up and doing, being a responsible gun owner. That's another thing that this industry does and the NSSF does that, really we've gotten a lot of accolades for that. And I'm not sure we try to talk about it, but a lot of the mainstream media doesn't really want to cover that, right?
That's the problem. You have this narrative in the media that, and they're great at storytelling. I mean, that's their job, right? And I think this industry could do a better job of, I wouldn't say necessarily being more inclusive. I think it is inclusive to those who want to be involved, but just doing a better job sharing the entirety of the story rather than, hey, we're just going to go out and shoot guns in the backwoods and kill things.
Right.
And I think that's the gap that a lot of people who haven't been exposed to firearms, haven't been hunting as they were growing up. I didn't hunt as I was growing up, and I had a completely different perspective about this industry and this way of life 20 years ago than I do now, even over the past 3 or 4 years as I've immersed myself even more fully.
Right. It's any time that I have an opportunity to talk to because most people, you've got some people that are way over here and there's probably not anything we'll ever do to convince them any different as it relates to, hunting and the shooting sports and what we do. But there's a whole group of people, a really large group of people that are agnostic. They don't really, they don't do it.
They just haven't been exposed to it.
They don't really know they haven't been exposed. And so when I've had a chance to, we have friends that way. Both my wife and I hunt, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's a good hobby to do together.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Is she better than you, or are you a better hunter than her?
You should ask her that. The thing is, I'll tell you one thing about women hunters. They're intense.
They are intense,
and
there's no doubt.
Their ability to focus, they've got this special thing. She can shoot like none other.
I just don't think women put the same pressure on themselves to perform as men do.
I think you're right.
Because I know when I get up there, I get trigger happy, and I don't hunt with a rifle a whole lot. I'm more of a bow hunter. I would say bow stalker. I wouldn't say bow hunter too much yet, because I've only been doing it for a couple of years, and I get plenty of stalks per animal down. But I get excited. I get anxious, and my wife, she hunts as well. She doesn't. I mean, she's excited, but it doesn't freak her out because she's not under this pressure to perform for anybody else.
Yeah, it's anyway. She's an awesome hunter. She does a great job.
And did you grow up hunting?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. My grandfather took me hunting for the first time. I think I was probably 8 years old, and it kind of hooked me forever, and I think it's just something that's in certain folks, DNA. I think it's in It's down there latent in all men's DNA.
I was going to say, I think it's in everybody's DNA.
But some of us had the opportunity to kind of get exposed early, and I grew up doing that, and I love every aspect of hunting. It's not just one piece of it. I like hunting. I have a gun dog. I have 2 gun dogs right now, and I love hunting with them and get out in the field and do that. I'm a big game hunter.
Is that right?
Primarily what I do.
Sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and with my job, I do get a lot of opportunities.
That is the
job,
beauty
right?
of what you do. Well, why don't you tell us what you do, and that way these guys can connect the dots and understand a little bit about where you're coming from.
Yeah, so I'm the president and CEO of Leupold Stevens. We're a 5th-generation family-owned business based in Beaverton, Oregon. We've got about 700 employees. We make rifle scopes in our factory 7 days a week.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. Interesting place to do it.
How many scopes would you say on average would you crank out a day?
We keep that pretty confidential, but it's lots.
A lot.
It's lots.
Significant.
Yeah. The beauty of being privately held is we try to keep that kind of, put it this way, we make hundreds of thousands of scopes in a year.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And any optic that you're going to mount on any kind of a firearm.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're putting on a handgun, whether you're putting on a bolt-action rifle, and AR, has to come out of our factory in Beaverton. And
as opposed to what?
As opposed to our competitors that source them.
I get you. Yeah.
Generally from Asia.
Sure, right. Overseas.
Yeah, so it's got to be made in our factory.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's that moment of truth. You're looking through, you're getting ready to pull the trigger. That's the moment of truth in a hunting or shooting situation. It's got to work. And so we guarantee our product for life. Even if you hand it down to your son, we're going to guarantee it for him.
It's powerful. That's good, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's a big deal to us to make sure that, we talk about, guaranteeing performance. And there's a lot of warranties out there. But, if you've drawn a tag and you're in the backcountry and you've waited 10 years for this tag and your optic doesn't work, guess what? There's no FedEx.
Right, that's it. And your hunt is over.
That's right.
I've got a friend who just drew a special tag on a mule deer that he's wanted to get for I think 25 years for this tag, and Big Chino Outfitters, in fact.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we know them as well.
Great guys.
And you need that stuff to perform. But and it's not only about performance. I think that's a given, right? But I don't want to understate that. It is about performance. But I also think it's a uniquely American. Hunting is uniquely American, but I think firearms in general is uniquely American. Our ability to own firearms, our ability to go out and hunt public land, our ability to support what it is in our way of life. And I think the fact that you are making everything in America is part of not just the story, but part of the experience and a critical component of it as well.
That's right. That's right. And so we do import some items in our line. Again, none of our optics that you mount on any kind of a weapon, but some of the things we do in observation, we make some of our spotting scopes in our factory. All of our mounting systems predominantly are made in our factory. We might have some machine shops throughout the U.S. that will help us on some pieces like that. But there are certain things we import, so I want to be clear on that.
Yeah.
But the biggest piece of our business is our rifle scope business.
Right.
And we do things with our military. We do a lot with with our allies, and just really proud of that because, we talk about creating epic moments. That's our reason for being, and our core purpose as an organization. And I get pretty excited, and every single one of our employees gets excited about creating that epic moment for a father and daughter in the field, or father and son in the field, and those things. But more importantly, when I've gotten feedback from our warfighters that says, hey, you know what, I was in a tough spot, and this is what happened, and my optic performed flawlessly. It gives me chills talking about it right now.
Oh, no doubt.
And
that's literally a life and death situation. I mean, there's no, oh, I hope this works, or let me fix this, or let me correct this. Like, you have split seconds to be able to make that decision or use that piece of equipment that will save yours and other people's lives.
That's
your
right.
brothers.
Yeah. And
it's a little important.
We take that, that's an epic moment.
Right.
That's what our team gets. We have, with 700 employees, not every single one of our team members hunts and shoots. Most of them do. If they're in, product marketing, if they're in sales, if they're in, engineering,
it'd be almost a little bit disingenuous if those guys did not.
Almost all of them do. Yeah.
Right. How are you going to sell that stuff if you don't even use it?
That's right. But the rest of our team, they get inspired by that, by quality, and by the ability of making sure that they're going to deliver on that epic moment when they walk into that factory. So anyway, it's
I think about
good stuff.
Like, how big is your facility? Because I think about 700 people. I've got a friend that we were talking about, Pete Roberts with Origin, and I know his facilities. I've been there and helped him move some stuff around, and he's got, I think, roughly 50, 60 employees, and I think about 10 times the size of that.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine what it's like to oversee that sort of operation. That just seems overwhelming and daunting to me, frankly.
Yeah.
I can't even, like, lead myself and my son, like, shipping 5 to 10 orders a day sometimes, let alone worrying about getting 700 things done or 700 people managed.
Yeah, you've got to, when you get to the size and the other thing with our product is it's complex. If you take, one of these rifle scopes that's sitting out here on the higher end, like a Mark V, for example, it's over 200 parts, right?
Yeah.
And it's gotta all come together. The tolerances are so tight because A, it's got to be waterproof.
Yep.
B, we got to guarantee it forever. C, it's got to be optically perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to work in any temperature, right? And so when you pull all that together and you think about that, your ability to get an architecture in place in the organization to allow that to happen, on a big scale, every single day, and guarantee it and go through that is a huge undertaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've really got to have the right processes in place, and more importantly, the right leadership team and the right team members that are passionate about getting that done every day.
Yeah.
And following that. And it takes that complexity out of the business somewhat.
I think that's where a lot of guys get hung up, whether they're trying to lead their family or a small team at work or lead an organization or they're on a team or coaching, so many different capacities where they feel as if they need to do it all. And I can't imagine with the kind of schedule and operation that you're running here that you can even do, a small percentage of the things that need to get done. Your oversight, right?
Right.
But I think that's where a lot of guys get hung up is they're like, well, I need to do it all. If I don't do it all, then it won't get done right or it won't get done on time or correctly. And I think men have a real hard time letting go of some of the, not quality necessarily, but just letting go of some of the reins so that other people can step up into those roles. And I imagine you've had to do that very well.
Yeah, I learned early in my career. I was fortunate. I got my first CEO job when I was 33 years old. I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I made a ton of mistakes and I learned a lot.
Yeah.
At that time, I was in that mode, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I was kind of had a lot of success early on and worked real hard and felt like, I can kind of make anything happen if I just work hard enough.
Sure.
And what I found was actually you can do a lot, but it is limiting. Mm-hmm. And what I learned was a really, really simple thing. Hire people smarter than you and let them roll.
Let me ask you this, because I think people know that instinctively. It's harder to do, right? Because you got to find the right people and then you got to let go of the reins. But at the same time, why would somebody who, for example, is smarter than you want to come work with an organization as opposed to, like, go do their own thing?
Well, look, you've gotta find people that are experts in that area. So if you think about a leadership team, right, and building a leadership team for a consumer products company, ours is an easy one to kind of use. The reality is I have to have an expert as it relates to product, mm-hmm. right? A product leader.
No doubt.
So they've got to have a better understanding of engineering
mm-hmm.
than what I do.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to have a better understanding of kind of, product uses and things like that than what I do. So they may not know more than me about the finance side of the business or the brand side of the business or whatever, but you've got to build that team of experts in each one of those areas as you get to a larger organization. So you can't have a bunch of kind of I know everythings.
Right.
You really, and so, my leader here of product, I hired a young guy, gave him an opportunity, our VP of product, Tim Lesser, who, he was a guide for a part of his career, mm-hmm. super smart, spent a lot of time at Leupold, had left the company, and he was actually my first hire when I came to Leupold and Stevens. And I just looked at it, I said, this guy has incredible field knowledge, he's got an engineering bent to him, and he's going to be a guy that's going to really be able to provide authenticity to our product line and do that. If you look at my sales leader, he is an incredibly strategic sales professional. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's his expertise. So in every one of the areas, my human resources leader and what she brings to the team in terms of understanding people and putting people systems in place and things like that. Even if you're in a small organization, look at, it's almost like having a quarterbacking a football team, you've got to look and say, okay, I don't need 7 tight ends.
Right.
I need one really good one.
Right.
But then I need this small, fast receiver over here,
Sure.
right? And so you got to build and find those skill sets. And once you put that team together, and you got to know what you're good at. So, I tend to spend more time on the marketing and product and branding side of our business. That's kind of my background for the, generally, although I understand all aspects of it. And so I build my team in those other areas, really strong manufacturing, team leaders that I have. So I want those kind of things. Yep.
I think the challenge that a lot of guys might run into as well is that how do you know that somebody you have in the place, let's say marketing or development or engineering, whatever it may be, like how do you know that individual where you might be deficient in that area is performing at the highest level? Like what are the checks and balances and systems in place to ensure that person that you may not be an expert at is doing their job well? Like how do you know that?
Well, let's be clear. You have to be really, really good.
Sure.
At
you can't know
areas.
Nothing.
You can't know nothing.
Right.
That just doesn't work.
Right.
Generally, you don't get to the level of running an organization like ours, if you don't have competency in all those areas. But what I do want, and so, the first thing I would say is, you hire folks, you get folks on your team with a proven track record. Most importantly, they've got to align with your core values as an organization, and that's a really critical piece of it. And we have a set of core values in our organization that, I do every new team member orientation. I want to make sure that when they come into the company,
you do it personally?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I do it with my head of HR.
Right.
Yeah. And I do it for a reason, because I want to make sure they're really clear on what we're about, what we stand for. And I tell them, and I remember the first time that I did it, is my VP of Human Resources kind of went, I don't know if this is a good idea to do this. She was kind of like going.
What was her hesitation?
Well, the hesitation was what I'm about to say was, I tell every new team member, I say, listen, here's our core values. I take them through them.
Right. I
said, these are pretty easy to get along with, but they're critical, but they're non-negotiable. This is what we are. This is what we're about. This is non-negotiable. So guess what? It's a great job market out there. And if this doesn't fit for you, you should go and find a place that you can fit and you can be aligned with the values of that organization.
Right. Sure.
Don't spend your time here.
Yeah.
I encourage you.
I think that's good. You have to give them an out, because if you don't, then they feel hamstringed into moving forward even though they may not align. And so you get these people who faked their way through aligning with your core values, and then you find out a year or 2 or 5 years down the road that this person did not align at all. Yeah. They just lied the entire time.
That's exactly right.
So you have to give them that path to go out.
That's exactly right.
And I think, too, is genuinely care that they succeed.
Right.
Like I think there's a lot of people who are vengeful or just out of spite, like don't want these people to succeed. I've had companies that I work with and know very well who, if they have to let an employee go, like they genuinely still care about that person and they want that person to thrive. There's no sort of revenge or anything about it, or spite in that at all.
Right. It's definitely that, and I think here's the other thing you have to be as a leader mindful of. And honestly, I think everything that we're talking about, I have a fairly large organization, but this works even if you've got 20 people in your organization or 10. And it may even be more important to have those values established and where you're at, or certainly as important. Because what happens is, if you have, I always kind of look at the 3 types of team members, and I tell my leaders this: you've got folks on your team that are competent in what they're supposed to do, and they're aligned with your values, and they're stars. Continue to give them what they need to be successful. You've got team members that are maybe not as competent as they need to be. Maybe they're growing in their career, or they've got a job. They've got to continue to learn, but they're aligned with your core values, and you got to invest in them. That's where you got to really look at them. You got to sit down and you got to have conversations about, hey, this is directionally where I want you to go, and we're going to invest in you. We want to invest in you and get you there. The third is someone who's actually competent, but not aligned with the core values of the organization. And what I tell my team is, fire them today.
Right.
And it sounds harsh, but it's true. Because what happens is they create cancers in the organization.
Yes.
And that spreads. And so, I have not found yet, I'm 55 years old, so I've been doing this a while, and I have yet to find, and I've tried, a time where someone that wasn't aligned with the values of the organization made it.
Yeah. Well, not only made it, but actually helped. They undermined everything you do.
Right.
But the trap is they're producing.
That's the trap.
That's the trap. It's like you have this high performer who brings in revenue or speeds up times or whatever it is they bring to the organization.
That's exactly right.
And so you overlook their cancerous type toxic behavior because they happen to be producing. But what you don't see is how much more productive things could be if that person wasn't around. Like you don't get to see that side of things.
That's exactly right. That's
exactly
a challenge. Right. You nailed it, and it is.
Yeah.
And it's hard for a lot of leaders. I mean, a lot of really experienced folks. We tend to, all of us that do the things we do, and we tend to be kind of type A, and we want to make things better. And if you've got a positive outlook, you always like, wow, well, if they just did this, they would make it, and it'd be great.
Yeah, you want people to win.
You want them to be successful, right? And what you find is. It just doesn't work. And so spend your time investing in folks that are aligned with your core values and have the ability to either get competent or are competent in what they're supposed to be doing, and it works.
What is the authority that you give your, I'm assuming it's your department leaders who are hiring, firing, coaching, et cetera, et cetera. How do you delegate that authority and ensure that they're making the best hiring decisions and firing decisions as well?
Well, it starts with me, right? So I have to build a team that I trust, I respect, and that works together as a team. And I've been at Leupold & Stevens 6 years.
Okay.
And it's taken me, it took me 4 years to really get the team in place that I wanted, because you can't go work on everything immediately, right? And we have a great organization, a lot of success, but I changed out almost every senior leader, over a period of time. And so you have to be really, really trusting, and you got to make sure that you have the right people to be able to then make that next step, because I expect them to be able to do the same thing with their leadership teams that they build. So teach them to build strong leaders and build the organization. And so once you get everybody in sync doing that and your values are in place, right, and you got a really clear strategic direction or architecture for the organization and where it's going, it works. It all happens. It's not easy. That's why you see a lot of organizations fail. But if you do that, that's how you make it for the long run. And I'm just incredibly blessed, because we're a fifth-generation family-owned business that is, our shareholders, they're family, literally, know, and I've got 60-some family shareholders, because we're 112 years old.
Which has got to be an interesting thing, because you're not family.
That's right.
Right? So what is the dynamic there?
Well, the first thing I would say is...
You're not blood. Maybe I should say it that way.
Yeah, they treat me like family.
Right, I bet.
And, that's the first thing, and that was one of the things that I was so excited about when I made the decision to come to Leupold. I was meeting with one of the shareholders, and they said, listen, we care about numbers, and we care about performance and all, profitability and all that.
Right.
Of course they do.
Of course.
And, but what we really want is we want to build generational value. We want to make sure that the next generation, the 6th and 7th generation, has this incredible company that we have today and that we've had in the past, right? That's been built. And I went, wow, that's what I want to do. I want to build that long-term value. I want to really look at building a long-term strategy. And, I'd worked mainly for private equity previously in my career, and so I didn't have that kind of an opportunity, because there's always kind of a set period of time.
Sure. Well, and then it's primarily profit driven, right? So it's like now.
Yeah, particularly if you're trying to eventually sell something.
Exactly. If you have that
that's what they do.
strategy.
They invest in. Yeah. So we're here. They don't even, the word sell never even comes up. It's not even like in our vocabulary about ever thinking about that with this business. And so it's been a really liberating thing, honestly, because of that mindset of, okay, let's make sure. Now, I wake up every morning, I look at numbers, because I'm just programmed that way, right? That's just what I do.
Yeah, you're a numbers guy?
Well, I'm not. I actually, it's just, I think in my job, that's part of what you got. You got to look at how are we performing, because numbers tell you a lot.
Sure.
Right? They tell you how did you do, what's going on. So I do look at that, but the reality of knowing that I can make these decisions that sometimes may not pay off for 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years maybe, those kind of investments. It's a huge competitive advantage for us over any of our competitors. I mean, it's a big advantage. So.
How do you judge these decisions that are not going to, quote unquote, pay off for the next 4 or 5 years, and evaluate whether that's a good decision, whether you're still on track, even though it may not be producing the profits or whatever it is you're ultimately after?
That's a great question. I think you have to start with having, I call it a strategic architecture, right? So what I mean by that is you've got to really have, if you think about building a house, you've got to have this plan, and you've got to have a foundation. But as you go along and you take these steps, and you can't do everything. That's the first thing you got to know.
Sure.
You got to really go through a rigorous process of saying, what should we not be doing? Because if you try to do everything, generally that doesn't work, in my experience.
Right.
So
or at least not to the degree that it could.
Not to the degree it could.
Sure.
So you got to say what's the most important things that you want to invest in and you want to commit people's time to. And then you got to put that on that map, right? You've got to get it on that architecture, begin implementing the initiatives and so forth that it takes to get those done. And then you, just like in building your house, all of a sudden you realize, you know what, my garage isn't big enough. I need to, or I didn't think about this the right way, and I've got to make a change here. And so you got to constantly be looking, thoughtfully at what are the things we're doing. Is it working? Is there tweaks to it? Is it working perfectly? Let's keep going.
Right.
Do we need to invest more?
Right.
And so I think that's really the key. And I would encourage any business person out there, whether you're an entrepreneur and that's what you're doing, and you've got just a company of one or whatever, but take the time to really sit down and think through your strategy. What are you trying to do? The Covey begin with the end in mind. Sure. It's a really smart thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, look at those things and treat your company like you are huge, and where you want to go, and set that architecture in place, and then evaluate it, look at it, and say, is this working? Do I need to stop doing that? Do I need to make a change here that's going to help it propel it faster? That's the key. And people, a lot of times, I've seen leaders and business leaders and even boards that govern over organizations, they want a strategy and they want it in place, and okay, leave it, let's go.
Right.
And then they get over here doing these other things.
Right, they get all distracted and everything else.
Stay focused on it.
I like that you're talking about, because I think these actually are dichotomies. They kind of end up sometimes on the opposite end of the spectrum. There's over planning, right? There's over action.
Yep.
So you're just acting without a plan, or not acting with a solid plan.
Right.
And so you're talking about finding the balance, right? Have a plan, realize that it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be tweaks and adjustments that you need to make along the way, but the action is kind of important if you want to grow the organization.
That's right.
Or the family, or whatever it is you're trying to grow.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And get those smart people around you. Sometimes if it's not hiring someone, it's having. I encourage. I have a lot of friends here that run smaller companies than we are, and we're really lucky because we're this independent company and we have these incredible relationships with Butch Whiting at Cryptek's a good friend of mine, and so we'll talk business stuff and I always encourage them. Make sure you've got at the very least a small group of advisors that can tell you the truth.
Right.
And can tell you know what, that's really stupid. I wouldn't do that.
These are business advisors that you're talking about, other CEOs, businessmen, owners.
Get them, surround yourself with them. Get them in there, and it may cost you a dinner or two, but I'll tell you, it's worth having people give you advice and listening to them and getting their perspective as you're continuing to not only build out your plan but execute on it.
How do you get these guys to give you real feedback? Because I think what a lot of people will do, especially when you're talking about upper level management, I think there's probably a lot of arrogance and ego and pride, and maybe some earned pride in what they're doing, but sometimes it's taken to the extreme, and they don't let others around them tell them the truth about what's not working, what's a stupid idea, where they're misstepping. Like, how do you encourage these advisors to actually tell you the truth?
You got to put your ego aside. I don't know how else to say it. You've got to be humble, and you've got to understand that you don't know everything. I haven't met that person yet that knows everything, and so you really have to make sure that you approach it. Think about what you want out of it in terms of the relationship, and you got to be humble and you got to listen. And sometimes they're going to tell you things you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's part of life.
Well, it's a critical part if you want to grow.
It's a critical part if you want to grow.
Because if you want to hear everything that you want to hear, or you only accept what you want to hear,
yeah.
I mean, that feels good, but it doesn't produce much.
It doesn't produce much. And you know, that's one of the things. One of our core values is we talk about, you know, making sure that we have you know, this communication, this collaboration that is open and honest and straightforward. And so we call it respect and candor. And so, you know, as long as you and I are disagreeing respectfully, and I'm being candid and truthful, I'm not politicking you,
right?
Things move forward.
Yeah.
You know, we can be honest with each other, and as long as we're doing it respectfully. Now, you know, I another thing I tell in my initial meeting with employees, I said, listen, the one thing I won't ever put up with in this organization is politics. If I see or I hear of an email that you're sending about someone else and you're doing this roundabout, which happens in organizations, this backbiting and backstabbing,
sure,
you won't make it.
Right.
Because if you have an issue with one of your teammates, guess what? Don't talk to someone else about it. Get up, go
talk
to them.
To your teammate.
Get up, go face to face.
Right.
Let's have a conversation and do it with respect and candor, and you'll be able to move the ball forward. And it is amazing what it does to an organization. And again, I don't care if you have 10 people or you have 700. It is a huge deal when you get everybody working in that kind of a environment. And I would say for a CEO, it's the same thing that you've got to do when you have advisors and you have friends and folks who want to help, is respect and candor.
Yeah.
Listen to them.
I mean, this obviously it applies to the context of business, but it also applies to the context of if it's just you and your wife.
Oh, yeah.
Respect and candor. You need to be able to talk to each other. I know of so many relationships, my relationship included, especially in the early years, where my wife and I would have an issue with each other, and we would have respect for each other, but we wouldn't talk about it.
Right.
Because we didn't want to rock the boat or whatever. And then when we finally did talk about it, it was only because we blew up and it had to be addressed, as opposed to being assertive and addressing it early as it comes up.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And, you know, you know, we all know, you know, when you have the role that I have, and then switching it off sometimes, you know, because I can't have a CEO relationship with my wife.
Right.
I am the CEO of the family. There's no question about
sure.
that.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is that, you know, she's my partner, and I have to, you know, the respect and candor thing has to work there too, just like you said. And so sometimes I have to go, okay, you're not running the company right now. This is a different thing, and you gotta
right.
do this differently.
You gotta switch hats a little bit.
Man, I'm lucky because I have a wonderful wife, and she's puts up with a lot of my kind of crazy stuff that goes on in this crazy life that I live, and we just make the most of every minute we're together, and it works. So.
Yeah, that's good. I think a lot of ambitious guys deal with that. I know I do, because I don't want to say the business stuff comes easy, but it's more objective. It's easier to quantify. You can look at the numbers. You were talking about that. But in the relationship, it's not like you can, okay, how many hours did I put in with my wife, and how many, you can't talk about profits. Like, there's no profit, right? So it's like,
no.
So in a lot of ways, the business stuff, I think, comes a little bit easier and more natural to a lot of men, and the relational stuff is a challenge because you can't really quantify it all that well. Like, you can't see the increase in profits or the decrease in overhead. You can't see those things in a relationship.
Yeah, you're talking about me right now. So that's
everybody's listening is probably to that to some degree.
It's that's exactly right. And so
I want to talk about your role as a salesman, I guess you'd say, is because I imagine you have ideas and vision for the organization, and you've got a board that you've got to present these ideas to. I assume is how that works.
Yeah.
And you also have to get your department heads on board with these things too. And I imagine there's some situations where it is in always 100% agreement. And so what is that process like for you? Let's talk about it. Approaching the board and the family, who created this company and this organization.
Yeah. Well, I think that the first thing is, you've got to, if you're new to an organization, I think that stage, particularly the first year, you've got to do a whole heck of a lot. You should always be a good listener. You should always listen, but you got to do a lot more listening and testing and really understanding what's going on.
What do you mean by testing?
The things have been kind of the way things are being done. Just because we've done it. You think about it when you walk into a company that's over 100 years old like ours, how many things that are being done in an organization like that, you know what? Yeah, I know we did that 25 years ago that way.
Right.
It's probably not the way to do it now.
So how do you convince them to see that? Because those might be their 2, 3, 4 decade-old ideas that they just love for whatever reason.
It's not easy, but what you do is you've got to first listen, understand, build that trust out that you can with your board and your shareholders, and frankly your team, as are more important. And then what you've got to do is you've got to put that plan in place. You've got to, and I don't care if, some people get this, the whole strategy thing's an interesting thing to me. I love it. That's like, to me, that's what I'm most passionate about in terms of the business, is laying out that plan to go win. You know what? I want to win every day. Right. I look at all of our competitors and I seriously want to put them out of business. That's how I look at it.
I think that attitude is something a whole lot of people don't talk about. But I think that's a healthy attitude and something we probably ought to talk a little bit more about, because that's what drives men to excel.
Yeah,
that level of competition.
That's it. And so what happens is, as soon as you get that plan in place, that architecture I talked about earlier, and of course there's a lot more to it, but then you can begin to say, okay, this thing we're doing, does this fit? Does this work still? It might be still the best way. And we have many things in our organization, from an engineering perspective, a product perspective, that absolutely are still, we've been doing for a long time, and they're still the best way. But there's going to be things that you're going to find that aren't, and you've got to adjust that, and you've got to make that. And so that's how you get them. You can't, it's not just trust me, I'll handle this.
Right.
It's really, trust me, here's the plan. Here's how we're going to do this. Here's the details behind it, and this is what this is going to mean. And it may take us 5 years, it may take us 8 years or whatever, but that's what you have to do. That's the critical thing, is putting those together, and that's when you start to hit that sweet spot. Now, going back to your question a little bit, what happens, there are times where, there's disagreements, and you're not going to get off that. And your job as a CEO is eventually you got to make the call.
Yeah,
because it's rare that everybody agrees with you. I feel pretty lucky right now because I feel like with my team, it's such a strong team now that they do. But in general, ultimately you've got to make that call, and you got to say, you know what? No, this is what we're going to do. Here's why, and let's go.
Well, and I imagine too, it has a lot to do with the way that you run your organization, a lot with the culture. You get these guys and gals, you get them in on board quickly. And you get them on board with the culture, and then there's that expectation that's up front, and there's no mistake about that. And then they also probably see the wins, right? So they see, okay, well, Bruce has let us down this. I didn't agree with that, and yet we went forward in that direction, and we won. It worked.
That's exactly right.
And so they see that victor, and they're like, all right, well, I got a little bit more faith in this next time that I maybe don't agree with them again. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And you got to have wins along the way. We've got I don't mind sharing this. We have our shareholders were incredibly smart. Years and years ago, they put a plan in place that every single employee that we have at Leupold and Stevens is a part of our profit sharing plan. And so we get a victory every year, and sometimes it's bigger and sometimes it's smaller.
Sure.
But there's a victory every year for every single employee, whether you work at the reception desk or whether you're the CEO of the company, you get to share in the profits, and there's no cap on ours, which is really foreign to most.
Sure.
In other words, the better that the shareholders in the company do, the better the entire team does.
Yeah.
And so that's a way to show, look, we've built this plan, we've put it in place, we're increasing what we do in terms of profitability, because that's the real critical thing in any organization. Yeah, I want growth, but ultimately I want profitability. That's what fuels us. It allows us to invest. It allows us to make this incredibly performance product that
to hire a bunch of people, to
get people
put
on board,
food on their family's table.
Exactly.
That's how it works.
Yeah, and so having those wins along the way, like you mentioned, are just that's an absolutely critical piece of it.
How do you guys maintain the culture? You bring them on board, you get them familiar with the culture, and there's some expectations that are laid out there. You give them an opportunity to back out if it's not a fit. Now you've got an employee who's been around for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They've maybe become familiar and comfortable, complacent maybe even to a degree. How do you ensure that culture of excellence continues as you have employees that stick with you for longer and longer and maybe drift a little bit along the way?
Yeah, I think, engagement has, so many, aspects to it. It's more than just money. We all know that. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other motivators that people, get inspired by. I think, you got to have a vision. Our vision is to be the dominant performance optics company in the world. It's really straightforward.
How do you? Well, I'll get to that in a minute. Keep going. I'll get to that question.
But I want to make sure that every one of our team members is inspired by that. Like, I take that as a really important piece of my job is when they come into that factory every day, that they are excited about what we do and what we deliver to our customers, right? And so I think you have to have that. I think you have to have the appropriate ways to compensate. You have to have, the right benefits and stuff in place that people, they get it. I think things like the profit share and, the right plans, those are all really, really important. But most importantly, you got to engage your team members. They've got to be a part of the business. It's not just, hey, go do this, but hey, here's what we're doing. The last all-company meeting that I had, I did a whole different format. I just said, you know what? I know I get up here, I tell you how we're doing, I do all these things, but here's what we're going to do this time. You're just going to ask questions, and there's no bad questions. Let's just go. And I stood up for all our team, and they asked, and it was awesome. I mean, it was an hour and 20 minutes of questions. And so I think making sure that they feel like they can make a difference, right, and they can, and giving them the opportunity to make a difference, right, those are the kind of things that keep people passionate about your business and about where you're going.
Yeah, that makes sense. I found that too with, we've got our Iron Council, which is a digital brotherhood is typically what I say, but, even in that, ultimately, I have to make the decisions about the path, but I try to involve as many of our team leaders as possible.
Yep.
When we have new ideas and directives that are coming down, I try to involve the members of the Iron Council. When I have a question or maybe there's some things that I want to do, I try to involve them and listen to their feedback. And then also, this is important, show that I actually listen to their feedback.
Right.
I didn't just solicit it, I acted upon the feedback I received, and man, that's gone a long way. But that isn't something I've always done. I used to have this mentality of like, well, it's my thing, it's my organization. Like, I'll do whatever I want for whatever reason I want. And although that may be true to some degree, like, you're not going to get much buy-in if that's the kind of attitude you have.
No, not at all. You have to. You nailed it. You've got to. I think it's okay to say, you know what, I appreciate what you're saying and I understand that, but here's why we're not going to do that.
Right.
Here's why we're not going to go that direction.
Yeah. You don't need to take it so far that just because you're giving the authority for an employee to speak that you feel obligated or compelled to move that direction.
Right.
They don't see the full picture either.
That's right.
Like you do.
That's right. But there are times when I've had suggestions that are dead on, and I'm like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense, and we'll figure it out. We'll get back to you, and we'll get going on that. Or let's get you involved, and let's figure out how to make this happen. So, it's that's what you do every day.
Right.
It's just part of the process.
Yeah.
Of what we do.
What do you enjoy most about leading the organization?
I like the people. I mean, I just love having, seeing people, love to come to work and work in an environment where it feels like a family. I mean, we've got a lot of times, it's not just family owned, but you can come into our parking lot and you'll see, for one of our shifts, and you'll see 2 or 3 people get out of a car and come in.
Is that right?
Yeah, a lot of organizations frown on that. I'm like, no, get your brother in here, get your sister in here, get them all. If you got good people and, it's a family environment, the way we kind of look at it.
Yeah.
It's a great asset for us. I tell people all the time, I said, look, if we can be insanely competitive, okay, as an organization, and focused on making sure that we become the dominant performance optics company, that's what we're doing, and we lay the plan out to do that, and at the same time treat each other as family, we're unstoppable.
Sure.
Our competitors won't be able to deal with us.
Do you think there's situations that you've had where you are too familiar or too close, employees or executives with employees, that you've had to consider as you've grown the organization?
I think your values take care of that. I mean, I think if your values are clear, if you have that foundation of values that are clear and understood, we've had situations where we've had to let a family member go of someone else in the organization because it just wasn't working.
Right.
And as long as everybody's clear on those values, right, then you can make those decisions and you can justify those decisions to the extent that you have to say, look, here's what it is, this is what was going on. We don't do a lot of that, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it's happened.
Yeah.
It's happened for sure. And you just, ultimately, my job is to look out for the collective group, right, for all of us. My shareholders first. That's always the CEO's job,
Sure,
right? That's
right.
They have,
You act on their behalf.
That's
so,
right. Yep. And then ultimately, I've got to look out for the team as a whole and where we're going to go and what we're going to do. And so I look at that and take that into account and make sure that all of our team members are thought of, not just, this is a situation. And,
right. Yeah, I've run into situations like that. Just to go back to Iron Council, where I've had to let people go of the Iron Council because, and they were liked. They were well-liked people, but there was just some things going on in the background or politics, like you were talking about earlier.
Yep.
And, where I've fallen into the trap of thinking, okay, I really want to make sure this person's taken care of. I don't want to ostracize this person or make them feel whatever. And then I realized, okay, my priority isn't to this one individual. My priority is to the mission. And this one individual is jeopardizing the mission, which jeopardizes the other 500 and plus people that I'm working with, trying to lead and trying to propel in their life moving forward.
That's exactly right. I listen a lot. I think you give some tremendous advice to your listeners as it relates to, you don't maybe call it this, but kind of having the values and making sure that you're not only personally living that way, but if you're running an organization, it's a living being, man. It's this thing is this living thing, and you got all these people, and these people are going to make it successful, and you got to be really clear on that.
The interesting thing about it being a living thing is that I've thought a lot about this, that if I died or decided, I didn't want to do this anymore, I don't know if I could stop the movement if I wanted to.
That's cool.
Which is cool. That's a great position to be in, but it also brings a lot of burden of responsibility in that this thing, if I don't lead and manage it correctly, could quickly become a monster of its own. And so that's a big priority and a big responsibility I feel like I have to steer it in the right direction. Sometimes I feel like I'm just along for the ride, and other times I feel like maybe I'm in a little bit of control. That's a balancing act as well.
When you get to that place where sometimes as a leader you feel like you're along for the ride, I think that's one of the best things that can happen to you, because it means that you've done the foundational work, you've put the plans in place, and it's working.
Yeah, true.
And I just think it's such a when I was younger, I probably, I would want to, control things more. Right. And I've learned, man, that's a great feeling. When you've got an organization that can see the vision and continue to move toward it every single day, even when you're not completely out there in front, driving the bus. Hard not to do that, I feel like, but it's a cool thing. So.
Well, I think it's a little bit foreign, not only to me, but a lot of guys, because they're so used to grinding, like quite literally like grinding through, and you're trying to move this beast and it won't move and it won't do what you want it to. And then it does, and you're like, wait a second, something's off here.
Exactly.
Because I'm so used to having to grind through everything or put out fires or do whatever it is I have to do.
Yeah, that's right. No.
I want to go back to what you had said earlier. I almost interrupted you. You were talking about becoming the dominant performance optic company on the market. I mean, obviously you can look at gross revenue, you can look at the numbers. Is it more than that? Like, how do you define when you've achieved that objective?
Defining dominance it's really a cool thing for us, because I don't look at it as strictly like market share.
Right.
That's one of the things we look
aspect.
at. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And that's why I chose that word dominant instead of leader. Be the leading. Because dominant to me means you're never satisfied. If I have 2 points more market share than my next competitor, I want 4.
Right.
And when I've got 4, I want 8. And when it's 8, it needs to go to 10, right? I mean,
sure.
it's that kind of mindset, and I wanted to make sure that, we have set market share levels that we want to be in every category that we participate in, okay? And there's some levels on there that I've got detailed out that says this is dominant when you get to here. This is dominant when you get to here. And so that's how we look at it overall, to kind of define dominance. And then we've got the other metrics of the business we look at, which is profitability and revenues and all that thing. But it's really about market share for us and how we define that.
Right.
And it's market share in performance optics, not optics, because we're not going to play the game of going over to Asia, throwing a logo on a rifle scope and bringing it over
just
here.
slapping something on there, making it cheap and sending it out to the thing.
companies all throughout here that do that. That's just not us. It's not what we're going to do. You know.
And it's fine if that's your thing.
If that's your thing,
I like that you've defined it and you've clearly defined what it is, not just some random general objective you're after.
That's right. And so, and then what we do is actually in that planning that I talked about, right? That architecture. Those, I talked about those initiatives that we end up coming up with and the things that you do want to do. We talk about those in respect to what does dominant look like in that, right? So if you say, we want to have the strongest sales force, I'll use an example.
Sure.
If this is what we want to do, what does a dominant sales force look like? What does that look like? What's a vision for that? What does that smell like? What is dominant quality? What's less than 0.5% return rate? What is it, right?
Yeah, right. You got to define it.
So you can get down and you can keep that thing going. I think a lot of people, they lose sight of being able to drive it down into things that folks understand. Because if you're on my manufacturing team and we define what dominant quality is, they get it.
Right.
Yeah. And
because you've talked about it.
So do you want to be dominant or not? Yeah, I want to be dominant. Who doesn't? You know what I mean? And when I mean that, I mean it's just in respect to the company and what it is. So that's how we do it. We drive that all the way down.
So I see this this competitive killer type mentality in you. Do you think that and in fact, I like that. I think more men need that. Do you think that attitude is frowned upon generally in society? Do you think it's embraced? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel that you have that mentality? I guess I should lead off with that.
Yeah.
Because you've said a couple of things where I'm like, man, he wants to crush, and I love that.
Yeah.
Most people don't talk about it that way.
No, I think that if you talk to my family, my wife, my sons, my daughter, anybody that's around me, and certainly my teammates, they know that I am kind of probably uber competitive.
Yeah.
I have to actually make sure I keep that in the proper.
Sure. There's a place for it.
There's a place for it,
right.
and so I got to be thoughtful about how I do that. But yeah, it drives me, and I think it's important in a leader. I just do. I think it's hard to be a leader if you don't want to go out and win. And understand what it takes to win.
I just think we're in this overly soft society that says, oh, well, if you want to win, then somebody else has to lose. And what if they feel bad? It's like, well,
you know what they need to
better.
do? They need to listen to Order of Man podcast.
I agree.
And because, and I've told both my boys, I've said, look, listen to this. Here's a podcast. I want you to listen to this. This is good stuff here. And I think that what you're doing is incredibly needed, as it relates to it's okay to be competitive. It's okay to want to win. In fact, it's really important.
Yes.
And now
it's also okay to lose.
That's right.
Like losing, there's value. Some people say, "Well, I don't want them to lose because then it'll damage their self-esteem." No, the idea of losing is that you figure out where you failed, and then you fix it so you don't lose next time.
That's right. And it's a really, really important thing. That's the beauty of hunting, man. That's why I love the sport so much is, you can, it's just, when you fail, it is like, it nails you to the bone, man. You're just to your core.
Yeah. And the feedback is valuable.
Yeah.
Right.
And I usually take, if I've had a hunt where I've, either something's gone wrong or I've made a mistake or whatever it is, I can think about it for a while. And then all of a sudden, I can feel the passion start rolling, and I'm like, okay, I know what I did. I know what I need to do next time. I need to do the same. It's a cool thing. So
I do the same thing. When I was in Arizona several weeks ago, I blew a stock, and you feel bad for yourself. And I'm walking back to the truck with my head down and thinking, this sucks, and feeling bad for myself. And I get back about halfway, a mile, and I'm like, all right, this is where I screwed up. Let's get back on another deer because I can do it next time.
That's right.
So
that's cool.
I think that feedback's important. Well, hey, I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're here at SHOT Show, and you've got a lot of people you need to meet, but I do want to ask you a question, and I didn't prepare you for it, but you said that you listen to the podcast, so you've probably heard me ask this before. The question is, what does it mean to be a man?
I think, for me, it's just, being able to have respect for others and really being honest with them and straightforward with others is probably one of the biggest things about being a man. I think just the integrity to do that. And I tell my boys, do what you say you're going to do. Do what you say you're going to do. And that is a big piece of being a man. So we all make mistakes. We all have times where we've said something and not followed through, not done it, not made it happen, whether it is in a personal relationship with your spouse, or whether it's, you know, your family, or whether it's your business. And the deal with that is, don't let it happen again. Don't let it happen again. So to me, I think that's the key aspect of it. Do what you say you're going to do.
It's powerful.
Respectfully, honestly, with candor.
Excellent. Well, this has been a great conversation. Appreciate you taking some time. I know you're a busy man. Obviously, you've got a lot going on. So to be able to sit down with you is a real honor.
Man, thanks for doing it. And I'm happy you're here. And you're welcome to use the Leupold booth as your home.
Yes.
And doing your other stuff.
I appreciate the invite.
And,
yeah. We're going to do a lot more interviews over the next couple of days. So I'm sure we'll be back. But really appreciate you. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.